that I've been wanting to make for a long time now. The idea for this video is actually what sparked my interest in starting a YouTube channel. Not only did I think I can make an end product that would look good, but I also thought it might be interesting to kind of take you along for the journey of making this ad campaign for a large company like Vans. But if I'm being honest, there's two reasons why I've been scared to make this video. The first reason being is I just didn't want to let myself down. I've been really looking forward to this project and I think the end results could be really cool, but at the same time, if they're not, I'm gonna be kind of heartbroken. I have rough ideas of what I want to do and some concepts and some things I might want to include, but I've never really had something super concrete to base everything off of. And so starting the project just feels daunting because I don't really know how it's going to end up. But I want the end products to look as good as they possibly can because I'm so excited about this project. But at the same time, I don't want to let myself down and get to the end of the project and just feel disappointed. And the second reason I've been putting it off is because I want to be very detailed and I know it's going to take a lot of work in order to get the results that I'm looking for. I don't want to cut any corners or leave any stone unturned. So for instance, if I find out that I take a bunch of photos, but some of them are just slightly out of focus, I want to retake those. I'm really trying to make this as clean and professional as I possibly can. But also in order to do that, I want to make sure that I'm doing as many formats as I possibly can. Because I know if this was actually an ad campaign from Vans themselves, they would have posters that they're putting in their stores, they have their social media posts, stuff on their website. And so there's just a lot of stuff that's going to be going into this and a lot of variations. And it just kind of felt daunting to take all of that on all at once. But I'm making some decisions that are going to affect my life in the future, and I kind of need a really good portfolio piece, so I kind of can't put it off any longer. Plus, I don't think I'm ever truly going to be ready, so I might as well start now and figure it out whenever I get there. Now, I don't know how long this is going to take me or how much work it's going to be, so this might be a multi-part series, it might just be one long video. I don't know. You'll find out whenever I post the video. Now, I already did the very first part of this project, which is just gathering up some inspiration and some reference images that I can use. So I just went through Pinterest and just found as many images that I thought might be applicable to this project as I could, and then I just condensed them all into one folder, and now I'll put them on the screen for you guys to see. So these images are kind of what I'm using for my references or inspiration, but obviously I want to make this project my own. So even though these are what I'm using for inspiration, I do want this to be different and feel like my own thing. So now we can move on to the next step, which is taking the photographs. Alrighty, so I've got pretty much everything set up. I have my key light here, and then I just have a fill light right here. I don't really need a backing light for this. I looked at a bunch of photos online of what Vans likes to do with their photos, so I just went to their website, looked at how they like to take photographs of their shoes, you know, without having a crew of people to manage that and do that. So it's a little, it's kind of all duct taped together, so it's kind of rough, but the results should be pretty close, and I'll still be able to edit the photographs in post, so hopefully any kind of problems I have right now, I can solve later. But I've already encountered some issues, nothing major, but I have a cat, so all of my shoes were covered in cat hair, so I had to brush all of them off. Some of the laces were kind of wonky and weird, so I had to fix those. And then I ordered this for a new shoe because the ones I have are completely unusable. They're really dirty and rough and torn. So I bought new shoes, so I had to lace these up. And then I also had, on top of all that, set everything up. So it's kind of been already a little bit of a struggle, and we haven't even really gotten started yet. But I think as of right now, we should be pretty much good to go. It's a little cramped, but I'll make it work. Really, my goal is to get as many pictures as I possibly can that I can use. So that way, whenever I get into post, I can choose whichever I want. And I don't have to worry about having to reset everything back up and try to replicate the lighting and everything to make it look exactly as I did whenever I take the pictures now. But like I said earlier in the video, I'm trying to be as detailed as possible. So if I do have to set everything up and take some more pictures, I definitely will. I'm just hoping I don't have to do that to myself. But now I think I'm ready to start taking some photos. So I went ahead and loaded these up into Lightroom so that way I can make some broad changes to the photographs to get them into a more usable state. Really, I'm not doing a whole lot here, working with the exposure and contrast of the image and then adding some sharpening. I'm also doing a little bit of patchwork here and there whenever I'm finding some hairs or some specks, anything that kind of stands out that I want to cover up. I'm going to try to do as much as I can in Lightroom so that way when I get into Photoshop, I already have a pretty clean image. But nothing here that I'm doing is really crazy or extravagant. I'm just trying to get them to a usable spot so that way whenever I get into Photoshop, they're already pretty much ready and I don't have to do much editing. So I've already taken some of these photographs and made some designs with them. Right now, they're still really rough, but I'm just trying to get my gears going and trying to figure out what I want to do next. What I've made so far feels a little bit too much like the reference images that I'm using. So I'm really just trying to figure out how I can take what I already have, but change it to make it more of my own. So the first one is more of a social media post since it's in a square format. I liked the idea of the shoe sitting right above an image, but it's blending the space between the photo that I actually took and the new photo that I'm using behind it. But I'm also trying to bring in some of the other aspects of the poster that I really liked and I think work really well, like maybe some of the torn paper textures or some checkerboard patterns. I like where it's at so far, but it definitely needs a lot of work. Now the second one is more of a poster design. So this could be an advertisement photo or just something that's in the store that's just kind of artwork on the wall. Once again, just trying to bring some of the elements that I'm seeing in my reference images, but I still feel like it's too close, so I'm definitely gonna need to change some things up. But as of right now, this works just fine. Now the last image is something that's straight out of my head. I guess this poster would be more about Vans as a company than the shoe, since the shoes are just a little bit of a smaller object in the frame. But they still link back up to a shoe. So whenever I first thought about this project and I was looking at some photos, I saw a picture of a pool bowl and at the bottom was the Vans logo. And something about it just really caught my eye and caught my attention. So I kind of wanted to make a poster design kind of based off of that concept of the logo looking like it's on concrete and the shoes are just sitting on top of it. I think it's cool so far and I see the potential of it, but I'm not really sure where to take it next. But as of right now, that's where I'm at. I still need to come up with a theme or a tagline that I can use, and I think that'll help kind of give me some more ideas. That way I can kind of narrow down what I'm designing into something that's a little bit more pinpointed. That way I'm not just kind of grasping at anything that grabs my attention. I really need an idea that I can focus on that will kind of help me make decisions that will make this project my own, but will also make it more exciting. So I'm gonna take a couple days, try to think of some ideas, and then come back to these designs and see if I can come up with something else. So I guess I'll update you whenever that happens. Alright, so it's been about a week since I've done any kind of design work for this project. And in that time, I got some opinions of some people that I trust, some people that I think are great designers and have a good eye, and something that they recommended, which I was also thinking about doing, which is to just do this all analog. So instead of trying to do everything digitally, I'm now going to switch over to try to do everything more analog. I'm thinking that'll help me come up with something a little bit different, so that way I'm not using the same tools that I'm used to and just coming up with the same results that I normally would. But I'm also hoping, since we're doing it more analog and I'll have to scan it in, it'll feel a little bit more authentic. So really my ideal goal is just to make a base that I can then replicate everything and take each one of the other shoes that I have and then just put it on top. But I guess that'll really just depend on how the design comes out, because maybe I want to layer things some more, and that might make things a little bit more tricky than if it's just, you know, the background and then the shoe. And if I'm being really transparent, I'm a little scared about this entire process. I've never done anything at this capacity in analog, so it kind of feels a little bit daunting to have all of this stuff, and it's just, you just got to make do with what you have. There's no, redos. If you make a cut and you don't like it, if you glue something down and you don't like it, you're just kind of stuck with it. But I know I'll never figure it out unless I try it. So we're just going to have to try, see what happens, and then reevaluate after that. So let's get to it. Alrighty, so I'm pretty much ready. I cut the shoe out so I can position it however I want. Got a blank sheet of paper. Got a bunch of tools. I've got some tape, glue, scissors, X-Acto. We're just gonna throw it all together and see what happens. mentioned that yet, but I came up with a tagline. So so the entire project is gonna be under the tagline of Better with Wear. So that, that could be what goes right here. I feel like I'm a kid again doing arts and crafts, which is kind of weird, but fun. So what I might do is make a kind of a collage using these boxes. Okay, so for the last one, I want to do something a little bit different than we've done for the last two. So I just printed out this rectangular shape that I'll use as a placeholder for a photo. So I'm pretty much trying to do something closer to what we already saw in the inspirations that I showed you guys. So I guess something a little bit more kind of what you would expect, but I do still want to try to put my own spin on it. But I thought we already did two with the shape of the shoe actually cut out. So I figured this might be a good option, or just drop the photo of the shoe in, done, or drop the photo of whatever in, and then we're done. We don't have to do any more work other than that. So let's try that. So where do we start? So it's been about a week or two, and I've been doing some work off camera. So I thought now would be a good time to give you guys an update, so that way you know what's going on moving forward. So after scanning in the designs and then doing some work in Photoshop, here's where we left off. So the first design that I came up with came out pretty good. I really like it. I think the only thing that I'm not a huge fan of is that there's not a lot of color in the collage. The only color in the image is in the photograph, which isn't a huge deal. It's just not my favorite thing about it. But I did end up going with the other two design concepts as a better direction compared to this. So after working on the second design concept that I came up with, we ended up here. Now originally I was planning this just to be the poster design concept that I was working on, but since it's not very tall, it actually works really well in a square format as a social media posts and advertisements that I'll be creating. Now the last one that I was working on is the final concept for the poster designs that I'm doing. I just thought it was really simple, effective, looked good, and fit well with the second concept that we had, so they kind of go really well together. So it's kind of already like I made them with the same thought in mind, rather than the first one, which kind of feels out of place with the other two. But once I had some time just to kind of evaluate the different designs and how I wanted to use them, I was able to come up with the different variations for each kind of design that I was making. So I pulled back out all the resources that I had printed out so I could make 3 different variations on the 2 different designs that I had, so that way I could make a design for each shoe. So here's what the social media posts look like. And then here's what the poster designs look like. I wanted to make sure they all felt similar, but I wanted to make sure that they were unique, so that way it wasn't like I was just copying and pasting everything. So that way every design feels unique and not just copy and pasted over forever and ever for everything that I'm doing for this project. Now, I may or may not come back and kind of edit these designs a little bit, but I think as of right now, they're pretty close to being finished. We're talking 75 to 90% finished. So if I do come back to them, it's not going to be huge changes, just small things. And if I do change them, I'll show them at the end of the project, so that way you can see how they changed. So now that I have these 2 parts of the project done, I can move on to some of the other parts. So I already have some ideas of what I want to make next, and some of those things include magazine ads, billboards, a shirt design, and a new shoebox design. I might end up adding more to that later, but as of right now, I think that kind of covers the majority of the things that I wanted to include in this ad campaign. So with this last part of the project, I'm gonna have to get those resources back out, cut up some stuff, and create up some new layouts that will work for each of the new formats that I'll be working with. I'm gonna do my best to video as much of that process as I possibly can, but I also don't want to make this video too long and boring and repetitive. So I don't know what that looks like moving forward, but you'll figure that out whenever you finish this series. So now it's just time to get back to designing and hopefully finish this project. All right, so it's been a minute since I worked on this project, but I figured it's about time I jump back in. So where I left off, I had kind of established a visual direction that I liked. So now it's just taking that visual direction and applying it to everything else. So I'm thinking I want to start with the billboard designs first. Honestly, as of right now, I don't really have a great idea of where to start with those. So I'm thinking that's going to be the hardest one to do. So I guess if I get that out of the way, everything else should come pretty easily. At least that's what I'm thinking as of right now anyways. So it's time to get all our resources back out and get to designing. Alrighty, so I think I'm ready to get started. I actually printed out a piece of paper and then cut it, and then I actually attached some extra onto the side. I want all the elements to kind of match the proportions of the image, of the canvas size, and since billboards are technically a little bit longer than you would typically expect, I wanted to make sure that this was longer so that way it could be taller, so that way whenever we cut out elements like, this for instance, it's not too big for the canvas size and it looks kind of wonky. That's kind of what I'm thinking. I hope I don't have to make this any bigger than it already is, but if I need to, I can do that. I'm just hoping that I don't necessarily have to do that because that means I have to do more math and I don't want to do that because that's dumb. So with that being said, the easiest thing to do would basically just be to take this, put it in the center, and then build something out around it, just like I've already previously done. I think that'd be pretty easy and a pretty safe way to kind of get this project done. But I do want to try to experiment a little bit, just so the billboards, the posters, the social media posts, the magazines, whatever we're doing, still feels like it has its own unique look or idea, while still looking like it's a part of the same campaign. So if I can't think of anything else that I want to do, I think this will be a safe bet that I can go to, but I do want to experiment a little bit before we do this. So I'm going to cut this out and then I'm going to start kind of playing around with the elements and rearranging some stuff and seeing what we can come up with. So let's work on a different layout that just has the shoe maybe in the center, maybe off to the side. Still trying to figure that out. But yeah, so we'll do it with the intention that we're going to use a cutout of the shoe in some way, which makes things a little bit more complicated. Fun, but complicated. All right, so I'm just filming this as a quick little update. So it's been a couple days since I came up with those last designs and I landed on using this one. So I'm gonna work on coming up with the variations right now, and then after that we can move on to the magazine ad layouts. Alrighty, so it's been a while. So what I want to work on right now is the magazine ad layouts. And at this point, I have a pretty good idea of what I want to do and how I like to do everything. And I've already done it like 3 other different times. So really, it's pretty much just finding new ways to do the same idea. But I did have someone give me a new idea that I actually wanted to try out with these designs specifically. So the idea that I was given was basically to take pictures of some stuff. In this case, I'm going to do the shoes, kind of like straight down. So that way, whenever I do the collage sort of design with the shoes or whatever, I can then take the pictures of the shoes or whatever else I want to add and bring them into the photograph. So it almost looks like I'm looking at someone's desktop. So it's almost like if this was my canvas, and then I just took out the shoe and I put it right here so you can see the design here, and then maybe like off to the corner or off, you know, wherever you can see the other part of the shoe here, or, you know, maybe there's a lace going through it. And I think it'll be cool because it'll make it seem like you're actually looking at someone's desk or at a certain like scene rather than just some kind of image that I made in Photoshop or a collage that I scanned in. Not only will it help differentiate these designs from the other ones I've done, but I think it'll also work really well for this specific scenario because it's like someone's flipping through a magazine and then they get to this ad and it literally looks like they're looking at something on the desk that they're, you know, reading the magazine on. So anyways, that's the concept. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna get the shoes. I'm just gonna try to take a... So anyways, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the shoes, I'm gonna just kind of arrange them on here. I'm gonna, you know, do it in some different locations, try to take the pictures at some different angles and stuff. So maybe it's, you know, kind of coming off one side or at the top, or maybe the laces are coming through. You know, just a bunch of different variations so I can kind of play around with it in post and figure out exactly how I want to lay everything out. But really it's just going to be doing some, I guess, like top-down photography, just trying to get some interesting assets that I can kind of build a scene with. So yeah, I'm going to do that, and then we can start designing the actual designs for the magazine layouts, and then we should be pretty good to go. We'll put it all together and see what happens in the end. Alright, so I think I've got the photos that I need right now. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create the actual collage designs that are going to be kind of the main focus of the magazine layouts. And then from there, what I'll do is I'll add in the photographs that I just took. Since the magazine layouts are going to be a little bit different than everything else we've done, I might change up the way that I'm designing things a little bit differently than before. Mostly what I've done is I've built something in the center and I've just made a collage based around that. But I might try to do something a little bit more where it's like, you know, across the page or something like that. It just feels a little bit more appropriate to do something a little bit different, especially since we're kind of building a new scene with the photographs that we just took. So yeah, let's get started on that. All right, so I took some time and I thought about what I wanted to do with these versions for the ad campaign, and I think I came up with a good solution. So pretty much the idea that I had was I was going to take the pictures that we just took and I'll overlay them up here on the top, and I'll just keep the background white. And then I'll put the Vans logo here as well as the campaign slogan here just in the white space, and I'll make sure that it kind of blends together so it looks like the shoes are on top and that the type is below, something like that. And then down here, I'll build like a band down here of all the different assets that we've been using, as well as the picture of the shoes. So that way you can actually see what the shoes look like, as well as kind of up here with the kind of flat scene that we're building. So that's the idea so far. I tested it out in Photoshop just to see what it would look like, and I think I liked how it looked. So I kind of just want to play around with it with the actual assets and, you know, cut stuff up and move stuff around, you know, actually do it physically rather than digitally. And I think hopefully we'll come up with something that looks good. And if we do, I'll just replicate that for the other shoes, and then we can move on to the next part of the project. So let's get started. I think this is like a good first try. I mean, I'll scan it in, you know, we'll see if it looks good, if I like it. Hopefully it'll come out okay, because I like how this is coming along. I was just kind of trying to figure out if we want to use this as the basis and replicate it for the rest of the images, but that's kind of where I'm at. That's what I'm thinking. So I'll tape all of this down, I'll scan it in, I'll give a shot with the images up here and the text and everything, and then we'll go from there. Hopefully we're good, and if it is, then I'll just record doing the rest of them and that'll be it. We can move on to the next thing. So let's get to it. All right, so I went ahead and I made a first draft, and that looks like this. So I definitely plan on revisiting this graphic just to make sure it's exactly how I want it. But as a first draft, I think this is pretty good. The only thing that I'm not quite sure about yet is the picture on the bottom half of the image. It's not bad looking, and it does help give a little bit more context to what we're looking at, but I'm not really sure if it's necessarily necessary. And I do think that it is possible that since we do have the shoes in the other parts of the image, we don't necessarily need to have it on the bottom as well. So theoretically, it could be possible that if we got rid of that, the graphic would still look pretty much the same. It would still accomplish the goal and it would just be streamlined. But as of right now, I'm gonna keep them in, and what I'm gonna do is I'm going to make the other variations for the other shoes, and then if I need to, I can always revisit them and go back through them and remove that image from them. So as of right now, the next step is just to finish up the next variations and then move on to the next thing. All right, so I feel like I got the magazine layouts to a pretty good spot. I might go back and change a few things, but I think where they're at, we're at a good spot. So at this point, I now have about 3.5 things more left to do. So the next thing that I want to focus on is something more typographic. What it's going to end up being is a poster, but I'm also hoping that I can use it for a shirt design. Thus, the 3.5. But I think as of right now, I don't need to do anything else analog, so I can do everything else digitally. So next, I'm going to work on the typographic poster, and then a shoebox design, and then a new tag. So thankfully, we're starting to get to the end of this project, but we're moving along, and we're getting everything done. All right, so I'm back working on this Vans ad campaign, and today we're gonna be making a typographic poster that we're also going to use as a shirt design. I have some very loose ideas that I think I might wanna do or try out, but really this is gonna be a lot of experimenting and I'm not really sure how it's gonna go. For all I know, I'm gonna end up scrapping everything and I'm not even gonna wanna do this. But the only way to find out is to do it. So let's get to it. So the very first idea that I had was to take a rectangle and then put the letters inside of it, kind of mix them up, twist them around to be a little bit chaotic. And I thought that that might be a good place to start. I don't know if I was necessarily looking to finish there, but I thought, hey, I'll try this. I'll see what comes up. Maybe I'll get a different idea. Maybe something will hit me. But honestly, after working with it for a while, I honestly just really liked how it turned out. So really, I just wanted to spend some time with it and really just try to figure out the best way to make it look as good as it possibly could. Like one of the things that I ended up doing was actually kind of inverting the idea where instead of the letters being in a box, the letters are actually there and they're just being cut off on the sides. So I guess you could say they're inside of a invisible box, which isn't a huge difference from where it was before, but for some reason, I feel like it's a lot better. After I had that idea finished, I wanted to move on to something else. I just wanted to try a different idea just to make sure that there wasn't something better. And so initially the first thing that I wanted to play around with was just kind of incorporating the words in a way that they would kind of blend together. So they would share different letters and stuff. I thought that might be kind of interesting and kind of give a cool shape and just generally be interesting and fun to look at. And so of course I just kind of played around with that a while, just trying to come up with some different ideas and just seeing what I could come up with. I liked this layout, but I also wanted to add in some photography. And so I just kind of added some shapes in there just for some placeholders in case I wanted to, just to see what it would look like. Sometimes you don't really know how things will balance out or how things will work. So it's nice to kind of work with shapes so that way you can see how it affects the entire piece. I was also trying to figure out the spacing between Better with Wear and the Vans logo. I felt like there was something that needed to be done there, but I just wasn't really sure what I needed to do. I was testing out a bunch of labels that I had, thinking maybe that might work, but honestly, it just didn't really work that well. So I scrapped that, left it as it is, and then I started to go back to work on the photography again. And honestly, it ended up turning out pretty cool. I wasn't really sure where I was going with it, but I just kind of kept going and, and I think it ended up at a pretty cool place. Once I had the layout in a way that I really liked, I wanted to kind of play around with the composition of it, because at first I kind of had it in the middle, and then I wanted to see what it would look like at the top and the bottom, and just see what I could come up with. What I ended up landing on is putting a picture of the shoes below it, which I think overall was probably the best decision I could have made for this poster design. It's got a little bit of a grid look, but then there's also a lot of cool negative space, so that way it doesn't feel too rigid. But since since that second poster came together pretty well, I wanted to see if I could take the typography that I had from the first idea that I had and then incorporate it into an actual poster design. That way it looked a little bit more finished and not just like the typography just sitting on a blank poster. So I was trying to lean into the strengths of the typography. Like I said, since it's being like cut off, like it's in an invisible box, I was like, well, since it's already kind of like that, I might as well just go full force and just kind of put it into a box on the side, which ended up working perfectly because it could fit into a shape that basically split the composition up into two halves. And then from there, I just kind of started playing around a little bit with some different ideas. Originally, I was trying to stick with what I had been typically doing for this project, which is kind of like this collage with all of these different assets, but I just didn't really like it. It just didn't seem to really work in this case. So I said, scratch that, let's try some photography instead, which I think ended up working out a lot better. So I managed to come up with two solid designs that I really like. They both have different aspects that I like about them, but if I'm gonna go with one, I'm probably gonna go with this one. I still might end up going back and doing something else, but as far as I'm concerned, I think this is a pretty good design. I may end up revisiting this idea and trying something else, and maybe I'll come up with something new, but I think as of right now, this is a solid start. And like I said earlier, another one of the goals that I need is a shirt design, and I was hoping I could use the typography from these designs for a shirt design. And so if I take the typography from this poster and put it onto a t-shirt, this is what it looks like. I think it's okay. I think I can do a little bit better. It's one of those things where I feel like it's got a good start, but it's not quite there yet. I think it works better in the context of the poster, but it doesn't necessarily translate over to the t-shirt. And so I'm probably gonna try to take this concept that I've already established for the poster design and try to rearrange it to make it fit on the t-shirt a little bit better. So I'm gonna finish up the rest of the poster designs off camera, but while I'm here, I'm gonna come up with a couple different designs for the t-shirt design, and then we'll move on to the next part of the project, which is the shoebox design. So since just taking the typography from the poster design and just putting on a t-shirt wasn't gonna work, I figured maybe I could use the exact same idea, but just make some tweaks just to make it a little bit better and make it fit within the confines of a t-shirt design. So that's pretty much where I started, just using what I already had as a base and as an inspiration, and then just trying to tweak it and make some adjustments. That way it might work a little bit better. What I thought might be good is having a more elongated version of it. I feel like that might kind of work as like a chest piece. And so I spent time with that, just trying to kind of see if I can make it work, you know, like placing the logo, maybe add some color, and just seeing what that might look like. So after doing all of that, I still really wasn't happy with where I was at. So what I ended up doing was going to the Vans website and taking a look at some of the shirts so maybe I could get some inspiration and see what they like to do on some of their apparel. And that was actually a really big help because I eventually came up with an idea that I actually really liked. Unfortunately, I started working on it thinking I would do just a little bit, test it out, and then I would just record the rest of it. I didn't. I just did the entire thing and I didn't stop. So anyways, this is the shirt design that I ended up with. What I really needed to do was just move away from the typography aspect of it. I feel like I was trying to force that part of it a little bit too much, but once I kind of got away from that and I was free to do a little bit more, I was able to come up with this, which I think is a really cool design and is a lot better than what I was working with before. But I still feel like it still plays a little bit into the theme of better with wear since it's still kind of rough and grungy and has some texture to it. So now we only have two things left, the shoebox and the tag. All right, so I've been working on this project for a while, and so far we've done poster designs, social media designs, typography designs, magazine ads, billboard ads, and now it's finally time to finish it all up. So the last two things on my list to complete for this project are tags and a shoebox design. Now, I did record me making the tag designs, but I didn't record myself whenever I made the shoebox designs. Now, the reason why I didn't record that process is just because I'm going to be working in a Photoshop mockup. So it would really just be me jumping between a bunch of different smart objects and making small changes. And I thought doing that, recording it and speeding it up and trying to make it cohesive would just look really kind of crazy and sporadic in a way that wouldn't really be fun to watch, just because I'd be jumping between a bunch of different small projects and going back and checking things and moving that, and I just thought it would be a chaotic mess and just wouldn't look good on screen. But of course, I still want to go over what I made, and we can still talk about my thought process making them and kind of where I ended up. So here are the 4 box designs that I ended up coming up with. Really what I wanted to do was just take the Vans box that they already have and just make some slight adjustments to make it work with this ad campaign. Like I said in the very first video, I bought a new pair of shoes just for this project, and I kept the box for this purpose. So I could take a look at that box and then just kind of mimic some of the things I had already done, and then just tweak and make adjustments to things that I wanted to, like adding the typography that we worked in on the last episode. Really, these box designs were kind of a culmination of all the things that I've worked on so far on this project. I was just bringing in different assets and things that I had made throughout this project and just kind of tweaking them to add them onto the box and just seeing what I could come up with, which honestly I think had some really good results just because I had already done all the work. So I kind of already knew what might and might not work. So all I really had to do was just kind of drop it in, maybe make a couple of tweaks, and then just call it there. But of course, I wanted to make sure that I did my due diligence and that I was trying to come up with as many variations as I possibly could, so that way the idea that I end up landing on, I know would be the best idea for the project. Now, my favorite 2 are these 2 right here. The reason I picked 2 is because I would imagine this would be a decision that would come from the company, because their boxes right now kind of have that like tan color. I don't know if there's a specific reason for that, or if, if they wanted to switch to a white box, it would cost more, which means maybe they wouldn't necessarily want to go that route. So having these 2 options would be a good way to kind of present them to the client, so we could say, if the project went exactly how we envisioned, we would go with this white box, but if for some reason the white box isn't really doable, we have a backup option that would work just as well, but would work better with the tan color. But of course, since I'm not actually working with Vans, I can kind of make this project whatever I want. And so for me, the box that I'm gonna go with is this white one. So that pretty much sums up everything for the shoe boxes. So let's move on to the tags. So my first idea for our new tag was to take the tag that Vans already has and then add better with wear around it, using a lot of the kind of jumbled up crazy typography that I'd already been using. I thought that might be a good way to kind of blend the 2. That way there's something that people are already familiar with, but I'm just bringing in something new that would kind of go along with this ad campaign. And honestly, I think this was one of those things where the idea is much better in your head, but in execution, it just doesn't really work out that well. So my second idea was to take the Vans Off the Wall logo, but instead of having Vans Off the Wall inside of it, it would have Better with Wear inside of it. So I brought it into Illustrator because I thought that'd be a little bit easier to work in that kind of way. And so I just kind of brought it in there, was just kind of experimenting and trying to see what I could come up with. And the results were okay. It worked, but I just didn't really feel like it was a very strong design. And so I was like, I'll just leave it there. It exists if I want to use it, but if not, I don't have to use it. So after that, I just kept going and seeing what else I could make up. So after that, I thought maybe my problem is I'm trying to focus too much on what's already there, and I'm trying to use the tag that they already have, that shape, that color. And so I was like, well, let me just try something completely different. And so I wanted to go with a more of like a traditional shirt tag kind of design or shape. And so that's where I started. I figured this would be a lot easier to work with just because it has a more traditional shape. So I was like, oh, well, I can definitely work with this and it would be a lot easier. And it would also allow me to keep the typography that I've already used and just bring that right over, because since it already works with a rectangular shape, I was like, it'll just fit right in. But once I had the idea pretty much down, it was really just making a bunch of tweaks to the color, to the shape, where everything is sitting, and just trying to make sure it was the best that I could possibly make it. And even though that was good, I still wasn't quite happy, because I thought, well, if they always use this kind of tag, maybe they're kind of attached to it. And so I thought maybe I should try a little bit harder to make sure that I find something that works well with the tag that they already have. And so my next thought process was, what if I just kind of take the tag that they already have and then just tweak it ever so slightly? So let's say filling in the tag with some different textures and colors and that kind of thing. And so that's what I did. I tried adding in all of the assets that I'd already been using, just trying to put them in, but the contrast wasn't quite working. So I just started bringing in a bunch of assets that I have, like all these just kind of like cardboard and trashy and ripped paper textures that I have, and just seeing if I can make something good with that. Which honestly, I don't think it's my best work, but I do think it turned out all right. It definitely takes something that's familiar and then tweaks it to make it a little bit different, and I think that's what's cool about it. But I still wasn't quite happy because I just didn't think it was really gonna fly. So I just thought, let me do the simplest thing that I can do, which is basically just take what they already have and then just kind of make it look a little kind of roughed up, maybe ripped up, something like that. So that way it still goes along with the Better with Wear campaign, but it's pretty much exactly the same. So here's the tag that I ended up going with. I made some slight adjustments to the one that you probably already saw in the video. I thought that it could use just a little bit of some tweaking, but honestly, it's not that much different from where we left off in the screen recordings. I know I mentioned this earlier in the video, but really my goal with these tags was to keep it pretty similar and just make some slight adjustments so that way it was unique enough on its own that would feel different, but also familiar enough to where you would know exactly what it is. And the way that I would think about this is kind of like a collector's edition, almost like, you know, like a shiny version of a Pokemon. It's not something completely new and unheard of, but it takes an old idea and makes some slight adjustments to make it a little bit better, and it's something that's a little bit more rare that you wouldn't really find all the time. And it would also have the benefit of not having to cost the company like a bunch of different money to go to a different printer and print out different tags. They could pretty much do what they're already doing and just use a different file. It would still attach to the shoes the same way, so there really wouldn't be much changes that would need to go into making this an actual product. But with the tag complete, we're finally finished with this project. So the only thing left to do is to show you guys the final work and just give my final thoughts. So after 5 long months of designing, shooting, and editing this project, I can finally put an end to this series. This has by far been the most in-depth project that I've ever worked on. Honestly, I don't even have an idea of how many hours that I've worked on this project. And unfortunately, the only time that I've really been able to work on this project has been pretty sporadic, you know, like a weekend here, an hour or two there. So it's been a really long and drawn out process. But luckily, all of that hard work paid off, and I think the final results are really great. But enough talking, let's get into the work. So let's start off where this project began, which is on the social media posts. So here's where I ended up with the social media posts. I believe I've showed these images already, but I just want to make sure I share them again just in case you didn't see them or forgot. And I also might have made some very slight adjustments here and there between then and now. Ultimately, I'm really happy with how these came out. I think all of them feel very cohesive with each other as well as the broader project. Instantly when you see them, you know exactly what's going on and your eye is drawn to the shoes, which is the main idea for this project. But of course, they also live up to the slogan of the ad campaign, Better with Wear. I edited the photos to make them look like they were kind of like out of a 90s magazine, so they looked a little bit kind of roughed up and not exactly pristine, as well as just adding a bunch of texture over all of the images, so that way they had a little bit more of a grunge element to them, so they weren't just so clean and crisp. And of course, doing all of the collage work by hand definitely helped make it feel a little bit more human and not so digital and clean and cut. Now let's move on to the poster designs. And of course, I'm also really happy with how they turned out as well. One of my favorite things about these images is if you click through each one of the images, you can see that they're pretty much exactly the same except for the borders that kind of surround the image. And so the image will stay mostly the same except for the shoes, and then the border will change. So I think it has a really cool effect whenever you quickly go through all of them, and you can kind of see all of the slight adjustments and changes, but there's also that familiar shoe at the bottom part of the image. I also really like the simplicity of the collage that I did here. In the social media posts, they were a little bit more elaborate and chaotic, but here it's a little bit more simple and refined, which I think works really well for these poster designs. It's enough to do its job to give an authentic and kind of grungy and war-torn kind of feel, but also not distracting enough that it takes away from the main image of the shoes. I also really like playing around with the Vans logo and just kind of roughing it up and kind of making it a little bit kind of torn in places and kind of having some texture over it. I feel like it's kind of unique, especially to these pieces specifically, because I didn't really do that a whole lot on some of the other designs, So that kind of makes it memorable. So it kind of helps make these posters memorable in a way that the other ones might not be. And now here are the billboard ads that we worked on. Now these turned out pretty similar to the social media posts, at least the way that I kind of made them. But I feel like at this point, I was really kind of hitting my stride in the way that I was making these analog collages. And so I felt like I was able to do some things that maybe I wouldn't have thought about doing on the social media posts and then incorporate them here on the billboard. Just kind of playing around with some different shapes and the way that I was kind of cutting up everything and placing everything. And so I kind of feel like these are elevated pieces of the social media posts that we did. But with the billboard ads, I had to make sure that I was kind of designing these in a way that would work on a very large format and that would also work from very far away. Because for instance, if you were driving a car very fast and you might see this in the distance, you want to make sure that it's easily legible what it is and that people will see it and understand exactly what it's for. And so of course I had to make adjustments for that, but I think overall they still feel like they're a part of the larger ad campaign and they turned out really well and they still feel consistent with the rest of the project. And now here are the magazine layouts. Now it was definitely a huge pain to have to go back and take more photographs to use them for these designs, but honestly the project's way better because of it. These designs are completely different than anything else that we worked on during this project, and I feel like they're better for it. But of course they're also using a lot of the same assets, and so you definitely can tell that they're part of the same ad campaign, but they're definitely unique enough on their own that they can stand on their own. And really the advice that I got to kind of take these photos and kind of make a scene out of them was really a great idea, and I was able to use them on the typographic posters that I would do later on. But overall, I'm just really happy with how these came out. Speaking of typographic posters, here's where we ended up with those. I made some slight adjustments from whenever I did the recordings, but honestly not a whole lot of difference. But I really think that those little changes helped make this feel a lot more final and complete. But overall, I'm just really happy with how these came out. I think the typography and all the photographs and the shoes, everything just works really well together, and they're really just an awesome set of poster designs. I guess the only downside to these posters is they don't really have the kind of collage elements that I've used in a lot of the other posters, but they have a little bit of that with the kind of red mark that's in the bottom left. But honestly, it's not a whole lot, but hopefully it's enough to kind of get across that they're part of the same ad campaign. But even if they're not, I still think they're really great posters and they still work for the project. And of course I said that I wanted to use the typography design for a shirt design, but that didn't really end up working out. And so I had to scratch all of that and just come up with my own idea, which I think was actually the better way to do it anyways. So here's where we ended up with the shirt design. Honestly, I'm really happy with how this turned out because it feels like something that I would actually see on the Vans website, and it's something that I would wear personally. I think the only thing that I'm not happy with about this design is that it doesn't feel as connected to the ad campaign as a lot of the other things, just because it doesn't have any of the elements that I've already used. But honestly, I think that's really a minor complaint, and I do still feel like this works with the ad campaign. And then lastly, here's where we ended up with the shoebox design and the tag design. I think these were a really great way to end the project and kind of bring everything full circle. I feel like it has just enough of the assets from all the other posters that we've made that also incorporate some different things and also feel unique on their own. So really, I don't know if I really could have done anything else for these box designs that I haven't already done here. And so after months and many hours, I can finally say that I am done with this project. It was definitely a lot of fun to work on, but it was definitely a lot of hard work and took a long time in order to get all of the designs done, shoot everything, and also edit this entire project. I'm really proud of the work that I've done here, and I'm also proud that I was able to accomplish a project of this size. And hopefully throughout this video series, I was able to inspire or help you out in some way. Really, I made these videos for myself. I was already going to be doing the designs, and I thought it might be entertaining to let people just kind of see behind the curtains and see what I'm doing and see all the little details behind the project. But hopefully from watching this project, you were able to take some things away and maybe learn something that you can use on your next project. I don't know too many people who would take on a project this big and then record the entire process, so I'm really hoping that you would get something out of it. And of course, if you did learn something from this series or you just enjoyed the videos, I'd appreciate it if you would check out the rest of my channel and then consider subscribing. I hope to see you in the next video.